The frontier town of Silver Peak was hosting its annual livestock auction on a scorching August afternoon in 1892. Cattle lowed in their pens, horses stamped impatiently, and in a makeshift enclosure near the edge of the fairgrounds, 23-year-old Grace Harmon stood beside other human merchandise, waiting to be sold to the highest bidder. Grace had never imagined her life would come to this. She had been born to a respectable family in St. Louis, educated at a proper academy, raised with all the expectations of a young woman from means. But life had a cruel way of dismantling carefully constructed futures. Her father's business had failed. Debts had accumulated. Creditors had descended like vultures. And when her father died of a broken heart, or so it seemed, her mother had made the only choice she could see: sell her daughter to the highest bidder to clear the family's outstanding obligations. It's not a death sentence. Her mother had whispered through tears as they said goodbye at the train station. You'll be someone's wife. You'll have a home. You'll survive. But they both knew the truth. The men who purchased women at auction in frontier towns rarely treated them like wives. They treated them like acquisitions, property to be used and discarded. Grace's dress was one of her finest, a deep blue that brought out her eyes, chosen specifically to maximize her value. Her dark hair had been arranged carefully by the auctioneer's wife, who explained that presentation was everything. Men don't want a broken thing, the woman had said. They want to believe they're getting something whole and valuable. You give them that belief, and you'll fetch a good price. The irony wasn't lost on Grace. She was being packaged like a product, and her value was determined by her appearance rather than her character, her intelligence, or her worth as a human being. Next lot, the auctioneer called out, gesturing toward Grace. This here is Miss Grace Harmon, educated, beautiful, and available for marriage or arrangement, who will start the bidding at $500. Grace forced herself to stand with her shoulders back and her chin level, projecting the image of a woman worth the money being discussed. Inside, she was dying. Inside, she was screaming. 500, called a voice from the crowd. It was Hector Valdez, a rancher known for his harsh treatment of his workers and his even harsher treatment of women. Grace's stomach twisted. 700, another man shouted. This one was older, with a bloated face of a habitual drinker. His hands were weathered and cruel-looking. 1,000. Valdez again, determined to win. The bidding climbed. 1,500. 2,000. 2,500. Grace watched the men like a hawk, tried to assess which one she was most likely to end up with. Valdez remained the highest bidder, and with each increment of the price, his smile became more possessive, more disturbing. At $2,800, a new voice cut through the chaos. $5,000. The crowd fell silent. Every head turned toward the speaker. A man mounted on a black stallion at the edge of the gathering. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with a face that looked carved from granite. His eyes were a pale blue, striking and cold, and they were fixed directly on Grace with an intensity that should have terrified her. Instead, something in her recognized something in him, a kindred understanding of injustice. 5,000? The auctioneer sputtered. Sir, that's double the current bid. That's an extraordinary amount of money. I'm aware, the man replied calmly. That's my offer. Miss Harmon is worth far more than the bidding thus far suggests, and I'm prepared to pay what she's actually worth. Hector Valdez's face flushed with rage. $10,000, he shouted, throwing down the gauntlet with everything he had. The stranger barely hesitated. $20,000, and I'm prepared to produce the funds right now, on the spot, in gold coin. The crowd gasped. $20,000 was a fortune, enough to buy a substantial ranch or a small town. Valdez's face turned purple. He opened his mouth as if to counterbid, then closed it again, defeated by the sheer magnitude of the amount. Going once, the auctioneer called weakly. Going twice? Sold, to the gentleman on horseback for $20,000. As the stranger approached to complete the transaction, Grace realized she was trembling. She had just been purchased by this man, a man whose name she didn't know, whose intentions she could only guess at. But as he looked at her, his expression softened slightly. My name is Thomas Brennan, he said quietly, extending his hand to help her down from the platform. And I want to be clear about something before we go any further. I didn't buy you to own you. I bought you to free you. Grace stared at him, unable to process his words. I don't understand, she whispered. It's simple, Thomas said. I came to this town 3 days ago and heard about a woman being sold at auction to clear her family's debts. That seemed fundamentally wrong to me. So I found out where the auction was, and I came here with the intention of buying your freedom. That's all this is. Tears began streaming down Grace's face. But $20,000? I can never repay that. You don't need to, Thomas replied. In fact, I'm going to give you a choice. I have a friend who runs a boarding house for young women in Denver, a safe place where you can stay, recover, and figure out what you want your life to be. I can pay for your lodging there for as long as you need it. Or, if you prefer, I can give you half of what I paid for you, $10,000, so you can start fresh somewhere else entirely. You don't owe me anything beyond taking care of yourself and building a life you're proud of. Why would you do this? Grace asked, unable to reconcile his actions with any logical explanation. You don't know me. You don't know anything about me. Thomas was quiet for a moment. My sister was sold to a man she didn't know when she was your age, he said finally. Her husband wasn't kind. He wasn't cruel either, but he didn't love her, and he made sure she knew that every single day of their marriage. She spent 40 years feeling like a purchased thing rather than a beloved person. I've spent my whole life wishing I'd had the means to prevent that. I couldn't help my sister, but I can help you. Over the following week, Grace stayed in Thomas's ranch house while arrangements were made for her travel to Denver. She learned that he was a wealthy man, one of the largest landowners in the territory, but he carried his wealth with a kind of burden rather than pride. He spent his days managing his operations and his evenings reading or sitting on the porch looking at the stars with an expression of profound sadness. She asked him once why he'd never married, never built a family of his own. He smiled sadly and said, I suppose I've always felt that my sister deserved better than I could give her, and accepting happiness in myself felt like a betrayal of her suffering. That's not fair to you, Grace told him. She wouldn't want you to suffer your whole life because you couldn't save her. Thomas looked at her for a long moment. When did you become so wise? He asked. When someone gave me a second chance when I had no right to expect one, Grace replied. When it came time for Grace to leave for Denver, she found herself struggling with unexpected emotions. She had been on Thomas's ranch for only 8 days, yet those 8 days had felt like a rebirth. She had spent them recovering, reading, learning about the land, and, most importantly, feeling like a human being rather than a purchased commodity. Will I see you again? She asked as she prepared to board the stagecoach. Thomas smiled, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him. That depends on you, he said. I'm not going to pursue you or complicate your life. You're free to go to Denver, build a new life. Forget about me entirely if that's what brings you peace. But if you ever find yourself wanting to return to this territory, this ranch will always welcome you. Not as a purchased bride, but as someone I've come to respect and care for. Grace did go to Denver. She worked at the boarding house for 2 years, helping other women who'd been sold or trafficked, using her own story to give them hope. She became a teacher, then an advocate for women's rights. She built a respectable, dignified life entirely of her own making. But 5 years after leaving Thomas's ranch, she found herself unable to stay away any longer. She realized that the man who had paid an exorbitant price for her freedom had done more than just purchase her. He had given her a model of what real love and respect looked like. And she discovered that she wanted to know him better, to build something meaningful with him, not out of obligation or desperation, but out of choice and genuine affection. When she returned to Silver Peak, Thomas was at the ranch, and when he saw her ride up, his face transformed with an expression of such joy that Grace knew her decision had been the right one. I came back, she said simply as he helped her dismount. I can see that, Thomas replied, his voice thick with emotion. May I ask why? Because I wanted to, Grace said. Not because I had to. Not because I was sold to you or owed you anything. But because in the 5 years since I left, I've learned that true love isn't about possession or payment. It's about someone seeing your worth and fighting to preserve your freedom. And I realize that the man who did that deserves to know he succeeded. I'm free, Thomas. I'm more than free. I'm happy. And I'd like to see if we can build something beautiful together, not because of what he paid for me, but because of what we choose to create." They were married 3 months later, and their marriage became a testament to the redemptive power of genuine respect, freely chosen love, and a belief that sometimes the highest price a person can pay is the price of someone else's freedom.